Hello, welcome to the Haunted Storybook. Before we get to the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you. Story 1. Eleanor pulled her coat tighter as the old bus hissed and rolled away behind her, its red tail lights vanishing into the evening fog. The road ahead, barely paved, wound into a dark patch of trees that locals called Stillwood Forest. She checked the address scribbled in her notebook, Stillwood Inn, Hollow Lane, Room 3. Charming, she muttered, staring at the crooked wooden sign dangling above a barely visible gate. The inn looked like something out of an old fairy tale. 3 stories tall, shingled roof, moss creeping up the walls, and a chimney that puffed slow curls of smoke into the dusk. The air smelled like pine and rain. It was eerily quiet, save for the faint sound of wind brushing through tall trees. She knocked. The door creaked open before she touched it again. Inside, warm amber light flickered across antique wallpaper. A short, wiry man appeared at the threshold with a smile too wide and a voice that creaked like the wood beneath their feet. "You must be Miss Eleanor. Room 3. We've been expecting you." She hesitated. "Thanks. You're Mr. Cates." He nodded but didn't move. "Come in before the dark takes hold. The forest doesn't like to be watched." As Eleanor stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind her with an almost gleeful snap. Mr. Cates led Eleanor down a narrow hallway lined with faded paintings. The wallpaper peeled in delicate curls, and the floorboards creaked with every step, as if the house whispered beneath their feet. "Room 3, he said, stopping at a door with a tarnished brass number and an old key already stuck in the knob. "You'll find it comfortable enough. Don't mind the voices. They're just dreams working themselves out." Before she could ask what he meant, he shuffled away down the corridor, humming something that sounded suspiciously like a funeral hymn. Eleanor stepped inside. The room smelled like lavender and dust. A thick velvet curtain covered the only window, and a heavy 4-poster bed stood in the center of the room. The wallpaper was green, patterned with twisting vines and tiny eyes, and a rocking chair sat quietly in the corner, though it swayed slightly as if someone had just stood from it. She dropped her suitcase with a sigh and sank onto the bed. "It's just an old house," she whispered. "Weird old man. Weird old vibes." But that night, as she drifted into a light sleep, the rocking chair began to creak. Creak. Pause. Creak. And just as her eyes fluttered closed, a voice, soft and dry as paper, whispered near her ear. Room 3 was never empty. Eleanor jolted upright, heart pounding. The room was cloaked in darkness, save for a sliver of moonlight leaking through the edge of the curtain. The rocking chair had stopped. "Hello?" she whispered. No answer, only the faint tap of rain on the window and the soft ticking of an antique clock above the dresser. She stood slowly and crossed the room. Her fingers brushed the curtain aside, revealing a view of the forest below. It was still. The trees didn't sway. The fog from earlier had thickened and now clung to the woods like a living thing. Then came the whisper again. Closer this time. "Eleanor." She turned. The room was empty. She moved to the closet, her hand hesitating on the handle. She pulled it open. Nothing. Just her coat and a lonely wooden hanger swinging slowly. She tried to laugh it off, but her breath caught in her throat when she looked in the mirror. There, standing behind her reflection, was a figure. Gaunt. Pale. Mouth slightly open. But when she turned, no one. The rocking chair began to creak again. The morning brought little comfort. Gray clouds hung low over Stillwood, and the inn groaned and cracked as if waking reluctantly. Eleanor sat at the tiny desk, sipping lukewarm tea and staring at her reflection in the mirror, the same one that had shown her something impossible. She hadn't slept. Not really. Every time her eyes closed, that voice returned. Always whispering her name. Always standing just behind her. At breakfast, Mr. Cates was nowhere to be found. She sat alone at a long dining table, where a fire crackled but gave little heat. The silence pressed on her like a heavy coat. As she returned to her room, footsteps echoed faintly behind her. She turned more than once, only to find the hallway empty. That evening, as dusk fell fast, Eleanor sat on the bed with the journal she always brought when traveling. She barely had the chance to open it before 3 deliberate knocks came from the other side of her door. She froze. The knock came again, slow, spaced apart. Knock. 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 She approached, heart thudding. "Mr. Cates?" she called. Silence. Then a whisper, so soft she felt it more than heard it. "Let me in." She backed away. The door handle twitched, jiggling lightly, as if whatever was outside had no strength, or was only pretending. And then it stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any sound. The next morning, Eleanor found herself unable to sit still. She needed answers, about the inn, about the voices, the figure in the mirror, and now, the presence at her door. She began searching room 3 with renewed focus. Beneath the bed, behind the wardrobe, even inside the narrow drawer of the writing desk. Nothing unusual, until her fingers brushed against a strange bulge in the wallpaper behind the bed's headboard. She pulled the bed away from the wall and peeled back the faded green paper, revealing something unexpected, a small wooden panel with a carved handle. A hidden door. With effort, she pried it open, revealing a narrow crawlspace between walls. Dust filled the air, making her cough. She held up her phone's flashlight. Inside, there were markings, scratches on the wood, as though someone had been clawing from the inside. Along the far side, she saw old children's drawings etched into the boards, stick figures with no eyes, trees with twisted limbs, and over again, the word "listen." At the back of the passage sat a bundle of fabric. She reached for it and discovered an old rag doll, its button eyes torn off, a thread smile still stretched too wide. Suddenly, from inside the wall, directly beside her, a voice hissed. "You found me." Eleanor stumbled backward, slamming the small door shut, her hands shaking uncontrollably. Room 3 had secrets, and someone, or something, didn't want them disturbed. After sealing the crawlspace, Eleanor sat on the floor, staring at the wooden panel now hidden again beneath the wallpaper. Her thoughts raced. Who had clawed those marks? And who, or what, was she supposed to listen to? Later that day, she ventured downstairs in search of Mr. Cates, but the lobby was empty. No guests. No staff. Just the sound of the clock ticking in the hallway, each tick strangely slower than the last. Behind the front desk, a dusty leather-bound ledger sat half open. She hesitated only a moment before pulling it closer and flipping through the pages. Dozens of names. Most crossed out in red ink. She turned back to the beginning. The earliest date was over 80 years ago. The handwriting remained the same throughout, which was impossible, unless Mr. Cates was far older than he looked. She scanned the more recent pages. Room 3 appeared again and again. One name leapt out. Eleanor Bellamy. Her own. It was written a week before she'd even booked the trip. Beneath it, in the margin, was a faint scrawl she hadn't seen at first. She listens. She sees. She returns. Eleanor slammed the ledger shut, heart racing. Behind her, the old grandfather clock struck once. Then whispered her name. That night, Eleanor locked her door, shoved the desk chair beneath the knob, and left the lamp burning. Sleep came in fitful waves, full of blurred images and distant voices. Somewhere between dreaming and waking, she heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, measured, and unmistakably human. She sat up, heart thudding. The steps paused just outside her door. She waited, breath held. Then a sound, so soft it could have been imagined, a long, deliberate exhale, as if someone were pressing their face to the wood, breathing her in. She crept to the door and peered through the keyhole. At first, only darkness. Then movement. A woman stood in the hallway, back turned, head low, dressed in a long, tattered nightgown. Her dark hair hung limp and wet. She rocked slightly, side to side, as though listening to a tune no one else could hear. Eleanor whispered, "Who are you?" The woman stopped rocking. Slowly, she turned toward the keyhole. Her face was pale and sagging, eyes cloudy like milk, and her mouth opened too wide. Eleanor stumbled backward just as the woman whispered through the door, voice as dry as dust. "I was room 3. The lamp flickered. The floor creaked behind her. She wasn't alone anymore. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. The icy grip of fear crawled up her spine as the pale woman's voice echoed softly through the wood. "I was room 3. The lamp's flame guttered and danced, casting monstrous shadows that wove and twisted across the peeling wallpaper. The rocking chair in the corner creaked again, slow and deliberate, as if inviting the restless spirit to come closer. Eleanor scrambled back toward the bed, her heart hammering loud enough to drown out the faint thump-thump of her pulse. She grabbed the chair and dragged it beneath the doorknob, her hands trembling. But the knocking started again, 3 slow, heavy raps. Knock. 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 Then silence. Eleanor's ears strained in the darkness. The woman's voice, barely a whisper, slipped beneath the door like a cold breath. "Help me." The words chilled Eleanor to her core. She sank against the door, closing her eyes, trying to steady her racing thoughts. Help her. But how? Trapped. Her gaze drifted toward the hidden panel behind the bed. The rag doll from the crawlspace sat now on the floor beside her suitcase, its thread smile stretched wider than before, as if it knew something she did not. Slowly, Eleanor rose and picked it up. The doll felt unnaturally heavy in her hand, its button eyes cold and empty sockets staring into hers. She remembered the scratchings on the wood. Listen. Her mind swirled with unanswered questions. "Who are you?" Eleanor whispered into the shadows, clutching the doll tightly. The room chilled. The whisper returned, now clearer and closer. "Eleanor, you must listen." A sudden sharp rap on the window startled her. She whipped around, heart thudding, to see a dark figure standing just beyond the glass, framed by the swirling fog. Its eyes glowed faintly, unblinking. Eleanor's voice faltered. "What do you want?" The figure raised a pale hand and pointed toward the forest. "Find the heart of Stillwood," it breathed, voice ragged and ancient. "Only there can the silence be broken." A low rumble rolled through the inn as the wind moaned against the walls, and the faint sounds of children crying drifted up from beneath the floorboards. Eleanor's fingers tightened on the rag doll. She knew she couldn't stay. If she wanted answers, if she wanted to be free, she had to follow the voice into the haunted forest beyond. With a final glance at the locked door, she slipped on her coat and stepped into the foggy night, the rag doll clutched tightly to her chest. The trees of Stillwood loomed like silent sentinels, and somewhere deep in the shadows, a voice called again. "Eleanor, listen." Eleanor's boots crunched on the wet leaves as she stepped beneath the gnarled branches of Stillwood Forest. The fog curled around her like a living thing, cold and damp against her skin. The rag doll in her hand seemed to pulse faintly, as if it carried a heartbeat of its own. The whispers followed her, weaving through the trees, unintelligible but insistent. Her breath came in shallow gasps. She tightened her grip on the doll and pushed forward, guided only by the pale light of a waning moon. After what felt like hours, the forest opened into a small clearing. At its center stood an ancient stone well, its mouth covered in thick vines and moss. The air here was heavier, as if the forest itself held its breath. Eleanor approached the well cautiously, the whispers growing louder, now unmistakably voices, children laughing softly, voices calling her name. She knelt and brushed the vines aside, revealing a rusted iron grate over the well's opening. Beyond the bars, darkness yawned, deep and endless. Suddenly, a cold hand brushed her ankle. She yelped and looked down. The rag doll's button eyes glowed faintly. "Listen," a child's voice whispered. Eleanor's heart pounded. She looked around, but no one was there. "Help us," the voice pleaded. Gathering courage, Eleanor searched her pockets and found a small flashlight. She shone it down into the well's depths. The beam caught something, an old, soaked journal resting on a ledge just below the grate. Her fingers trembling, she fumbled the grate open and lowered the rag doll tied to a piece of string down into the darkness. The doll seemed to pull gently, as if guided by an unseen force. When she pulled it back up, wrapped around its neck was the journal. She flipped it open, revealing yellowed pages filled with cramped handwriting. The entries told a dark tale. Decades ago, a fire had trapped several children inside the inn's walls. The owner, a man desperate to keep the secret, had hidden their bodies within the forest, sealing their spirits in the well to silence them. The last entry was a desperate plea. "If you find this, please free us. We are trapped in Stillwood. Listen to our voices. Help us find peace." Eleanor's hands shook. The rag doll, now quiet, felt impossibly heavy. A sudden, cold breeze swept through the clearing, and the whispers rose to a chorus. "Thank you," they said, soft and mournful. The ground trembled slightly as if the forest was exhaling. Eleanor closed the journal and whispered, "I'll help you." As dawn broke, Eleanor returned to the inn with the journal in hand. The front door stood ajar, sunlight spilling in for the first time in days. Mr. Cates waited inside, no longer wiry but tall and somber. "You found the heart," he said quietly. "Few have the courage." Eleanor nodded, exhausted but resolute. Together, they performed an ancient ritual recorded in the journal, words spoken to release the trapped souls. As the final chant faded, a warm light filled the room, and the oppressive weight lifted. The rocking chair stopped creaking. The voices were silent. Room 3 was finally empty. Eleanor left Stillwood in that morning with the first real sleep she'd had in weeks. The forest behind her stood peaceful, the secrets laid to rest. And somewhere, far away, a faint whisper of thanks rode the morning breeze. Story 2. Clara had never believed in ghosts, until the day she moved into the old Harper house on the edge of Ravenswood. The town was small and quiet, a place where everyone knew your name, but the Harper house had always been different. Hollow-eyed children vanished there. Pets fled. Even the bravest folks crossed to the other side of the street rather than pass beneath its crumbling archway. But Clara was desperate for a fresh start. After the breakup and the messy divorce, she needed something that felt hers, something that wasn't tied to the past. The Harper house was cheap, and its crooked windows and sagging porch felt less like a curse and more like a promise, of solitude, of peace. The first night, Clara unpacked by the light of a flickering candle. The power was out, again. The house's ancient wiring was no surprise. Shadows clung to the corners of the rooms, moving just beyond the edges of her vision. When she paused to listen, she thought she could hear soft footsteps above, like someone pacing in the attic. Brushing it off, Clara locked the door and climbed into bed, but sleep refused her. Outside the window, the wind whispered secrets through the brittle trees. She pulled the quilt tight and closed her eyes. A child's voice broke the silence. "Clara." She bolted upright. The room was empty, save for the heavy curtain that fluttered like a ghost's veil. Over the next days, strange things happened, pictures tilted on the walls, books scattered across the floor, the faint sound of someone crying in the dead of night. Clara's nerves frayed, but she told herself it was just the house settling. An old building with stories. Nothing more. But then she found the dolls. One morning, on the porch, lined up beneath the cracked window, sat a dozen porcelain dolls. Their faces were cracked, eyes hollow and glassy, staring unblinkingly. Clara hadn't seen them before, and no neighbors claimed to have left them. That night, The dolls were inside the house, in the hallway, in the kitchen, even perched on her bedside table. Their eyes seemed to follow her. She tried to throw them away. Each time, they reappeared. Then came the mirror. Clara's bathroom mirror, old and tarnished, began to fog even when there was no steam. When she wiped it, words appeared, written in a child's scrawl. "Help us." Frozen, Clara's reflection blurred, and behind her, a small figure appeared, pale, with empty black sockets instead of eyes. She spun around. Nothing. Days passed. The nights grew worse. One evening, Clara discovered a loose floorboard beneath the living room rug. Inside, a hidden compartment held a faded journal. The handwriting was shaky, a mother's desperate account of her children, 3 little girls, who had vanished decades ago. She wrote of strange lights in the woods, whispers calling their names, and a shadow that crept closer every night. Clara read on, horror growing. The mother believed the house itself was alive, hungry for the souls of the children. Suddenly, the candles flickered and died. The temperature dropped. From the shadows, dozens of small hands reached out, cold and desperate. Clara stumbled back, the doll's hollow eyes now glowing faintly. The house groaned. She had to run. Racing through the darkened halls, she felt the weight of unseen eyes pressing on her back. The front door slammed shut just as she reached it. Then the whisper came, chilling and clear. "Stay with us." Clara screamed, the walls closing in, the dolls crawling toward her, their hollow eyes wide with hunger. Clara's scream echoed down the empty street outside the Harper house, swallowed quickly by the night. Inside, the walls seemed to pulse, breathing in time with her frantic heartbeat. The dolls advanced, their cracked porcelain faces split into cruel smiles, eyes glowing with a pale, sickly light. Her back pressed against the door, she slammed her fists against the cold wood. No response. The house held her captive. "Please," she gasped, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Let me out." The whisper came again, soft but insistent, like the rustling of dead leaves. "Stay with us." From the shadows, a child's voice, a fragile, desperate breath, called her name. Clara's mind spiraled, caught between terror and a deep, aching sorrow. The dolls halted, their glowing eyes dimming. The hands retreated. Slowly, the air warmed. In the dim glow of a single candle, Clara knelt and pulled the faded journal closer. The last entries revealed a ritual, one to release the trapped souls, 3 little girls named Lily, Rose, and Ivy. Clara's fingers trembled as she read the incantation aloud, the words strange but beautiful, ancient and powerful. The doll's eyes brightened once more, watching her. She lit a circle of candles, their flames steady despite the stale air. Closing her eyes, Clara whispered the final lines. The house shuddered, the floorboards trembling beneath her knees. A soft glow filled the room, warm and golden. Voices sang in harmony, a lullaby broken free from decades of silence. When Clara opened her eyes, the dolls were gone. In their place, 3 small figures stood before her, ethereal and glowing softly. The girls smiled, their hollow eyes now full of light. "Thank you," they whispered. And then, like morning mist under the sun, they vanished. The house sighed, peaceful for the first time in years. Clara stepped outside, the dawn breaking over Ravenswood. She had faced the hollow eyes, and lived to tell their story. Story 3. Miles had always loved radio. Growing up, he'd spent countless nights tinkering with old transmitters, chasing signals through static. So when the opportunity came to host a midnight show at WRVL, a small local station in the remote town of Maple Ridge, he jumped at it. The station was a dusty relic nestled between pine trees, broadcasting to a handful of listeners who preferred crackling voices over digital noise. It was perfect, quiet, isolated, and mysterious. His first night on air was uneventful until 12:37 a.m. Static flared, then a faint voice came through. Help, please. Miles frowned, adjusting the dial. The voice faded. Then again, clearer. Don't listen. He chuckled nervously, thinking it was a prank. Maple Ridge had a long history of urban legends, but he was here for the truth, not ghost stories. As the nights passed, the calls grew stranger. A woman sobbing softly, a man whispering secrets, children laughing from distant playgrounds that didn't exist. No one ever called the station during the day. One night, as the clock struck 1 a.m., the broadcast suddenly cut to a strange transmission, a low, guttural chanting layered beneath frantic whispering. Miles grabbed his recorder, heart pounding. The chant repeated, words indecipherable but dripping with menace. A voice, deep and distorted, growled. "Find us. Free us." The signal crackled and died. Shaken, Miles tried to shake it off. But when he looked out the studio window, the fog had rolled in thicker than ever, swallowing the trees whole. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Miles dug into Maple Ridge's archives. Decades ago, a radio host named Caleb had vanished without a trace, last seen broadcasting a cryptic message before the station went dark. Locals whispered that Caleb had found something in the woods, a broadcast from another world, a message meant to be heard only at midnight. That night, Miles decided to follow the signal's instructions. He packed a bag and left the station, walking into the fog towards the old transmission tower miles away. The woods were silent, unnervingly so. No animals, no rustling leaves, just the dull hum of static in his ears. When he reached the tower, the air vibrated with energy. A rusty door creaked open, revealing a stairwell spiraling into darkness. Descending, Miles found a hidden room, walls covered in old radio equipment and screens flickering with static. In the center, an ancient microphone pulsed with an otherworldly glow. As he approached, the screens filled with faces, pale, hollow-eyed, whispering his name. "Help us." The voices overwhelmed him, memories flooding his mind, screams, lost souls trapped between frequencies, desperate for release. Realizing Caleb had been caught in the same trap, Miles took a deep breath. He grabbed the microphone and spoke into it, repeating the chant he'd recorded. The room trembled. The voices grew louder, then suddenly, silence. A blinding light engulfed the tower. When Miles awoke, he was outside, dawn breaking. The tower was silent, lifeless. Back at the station, the air felt lighter. The midnight broadcast ceased. No more voices. But sometimes, when the fog rolls in thick and the static hums softly through the speakers, listeners swear they hear a final whisper. "Thank you."